Hey, welcome. We are now live. So welcome to another internet retailing webinar. So it's my great pleasure today to be talking about consensual commerce. What does that mean? More importantly, zero-party data, new jargon. What does that mean? Luckily, I don't have the answers, but I am with people who do. So Emma, Lindsay, welcome both to the webinar. Before we kick off, tell everyone who we are. Emma.
Hi, I'm Emma Herod. I'm editor of Internet Retailing. Been with the company for 14 years, writing about retailing from when e-commerce started, and a few people sitting in a marketing department, right the way through to the multiple pure plays, 200 people, etc., that we have nowadays.
Wonderful. Emma, thank you for joining us. And Lindsay.
Hi there, everyone. My name's Lindsay McEwan. I'm the general manager for Tealium here in Europe. I've been here in this data business for about 25 years now, and have a career working with various different vendors as they try to wrangle the challenge of which party data we use and how to communicate appropriately to customers and prospects out there to ensure that we convert those moments of truth as they come by.
Now, party data used to mean a list of all the things you broke at someone else's house and had to replace. But before we go into zero, first, third, whatever, just give us a quick thumbnail of what we mean by whatever party data. What is that?
Well, you know, it's really about the permissioning around how do you talk to me as a consumer who is engaged with your brand. And you know, it's been an interesting journey over the past few years as everybody kind of wrangles control of that consumer as they pass through whatever experience your product or brand is trying to give them. You know, we kind of started off our industry with this concept of third-party data, where organizations farmed loads of data into lists and allowed you to kind of buy a lookalike pack of data so you could ensure that your brand was focused on the right consumer. Along came GDPR and a few other data regulations that kind of threw a spanner in the works for organizations. At exactly the same time, people were starting to see this concept of, actually, I don't want to understand what another person's view of my consumer base is. It would be really smart for me to understand what my consumers look like. So we started to think about this concept of gathering the first party as they came into our stores through loyalty, as they came online through experiences and so on. We really tried to get to grips with what this first party is. Now that we've got it, a new term has come out. Gotta love this industry for inventing new terms every 7 minutes. But zero-party data is looking at this concept of, right, I know who you are. You are happy to identify yourself through a consensual way as you come into my product or brand. Now what do we do with you? How do we actually give you an experience? And how do we give you something that pulls you into the brand? And as I said at the beginning, really starts to get you thinking about products, brands, offline and online as a single experience, so that organizations, brands can take you on that journey. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but let's just think about the implications of this. So retail has always been quite fragmented. So we used to have purchase as a till. I don't care who you are. I've got your cash or your card cleared. Then we'd have card data. Don't know where you shopped. I've just seen that clearing. Or we'd have email data, fluffybunny@hotmail.com. No idea who you are. Or your internet, your social media handle. So it all these little bits of data where we could throw things at people or try and make the connections. But the world you're talking about now is a level of sophistication beyond that. So I could know everything about you, Lindsay, as I do, you know, your height, your body mass index, where you shop, the fact you've got a new puppy that you're training, all these kind of things I kind of grabbed, but that still doesn't mean you want to talk to me. Just because I've stalked you doesn't mean you want to interact with me this time, next time, the time after. So is the implication of zero-party data that not only do I give permission, oh, go on, then you can send me stuff, but that permission is every visit, every time, based on my needs, attitudes, behaviors in the moment? Is that granular and that focused on a real interaction?
Well, I mean, Ian, you hit on a wonderful argument. I mean, human nature does not change. Just because we're tracking data, human nature hasn't changed. And I will happily engage with you as an organization if you give me something of value in return. And that's, I think that's the really important piece about this. This isn't just tell me everything about you so that I can spam you with mediocre, terrible messages that are irrelevant to you at scale. This is really about trying to personalize a journey at scale for organizations, something that we've always terribly challenged with. And that sort of, that channel to drive you in the right direction so that there is a constant cycle of consent, value, offer, or treatment is constantly looked at and constantly re-established. And the challenge is, as you say, Ian, if I don't feel as if I'm giving you data and it ends up in something interesting, I'm just going to stop giving you the consent to talk to me in such a fashion. But if I feel as if I'm getting a really valuable riposte from providing you that data, then I'm all in. You know, at the end of the day, it's about a better experience for me as a consumer as I enter into your brand. And this is an iterative process that organizations are going to have to work to get right.
Well, look, we've done 7 minutes, so maybe we need some more jargon, the move from personalization to individualization. Maybe this is the first time. Maybe there's a reason no one uses that. Anyway, Lindsay, look, why don't you just take us through, we've covered at a high level, just walk us through, some examples of zero-party data as you see it in the real world, how we might use it. And of course, that's going to raise some questions about what we can all do better or how we get started on it. And then let's hear from Emma, who's researched and written a white paper on the use of zero-party data, along with some surveys and a quick few case studies. So from the top level, just step us through, Lindsay, that, what be it, real world, how do we use it?
Yes, Ian, of course. So nothing has more focused the experience that people have and that dynamic between offline, online, in-store and at home than the past 5 or 6 months. I think what it's really done, it's really focused us on this ability to have a continued experience no matter where we are. And I think that's been something that's really shocked me. Some organizations have done a tremendous job and some organizations have just gone into utter stasis. So, is it the right thing to do? Is it the right answer? Is it the right way to communicate on the right channel? And is it relevant right now? One of the a wonderful pre-COVID picture of me when I was youthful and unbearded. Nice to meet you all. As I said, my name is Lindsay McEwan. I'm the VP of EMEA at Tealium, and really this concept of zero-party data is it's about consumers. It's about experience. It's about ensuring that this blurring of the lines between the high street experience and that sort of in-store online fulfillment of that high street experience is really grabbed by organizations as they move forward. And interestingly, there's been a couple of really interesting examples that have hit me squarely head on in the last couple of months. because the real question is, how does this really look in the real world? And a couple of examples really have resonated as we sort of come out of lockdown, and we've now started to re-engage and reassess what that experience means and how organizations have them. Two things really sprung to mind. Firstly, I had a conversation with a furniture manufacturer in Holland. They are 6 generations of furniture manufacturers. And I sat in a board meeting with a senior leadership team trying to figure out how they could solve a particularly poignant problem. And it was explained to me in a beautifully clear way. The chairman of the board turned around and said, so we have the 6th generation of this family running this brand. And the brand was called Hussens in Holland. And my great-great-grandfather had a wonderful ability to ask 5 simple questions to people as they crossed the threshold of his store. And these 5 questions really gave him the setup to what they were going to buy, where they were, what they were doing as part of their buying cycle, and where they sort of needed to go inside the organization. There was a wonderful moment at the end of the meeting where the youngest Hussen, who was running the brand, said to me, all I really want to do, Lindsay, is digitize my great-great-grandfather. Because and why I thought that was such a brilliant and relevant story was, we don't need to know everything about you. We just need to have permission to have some simple questions answered, so that as you enter into the brand or the experience, we can figure out how to guide you best so that you make best of your time. And I thought it was a very interesting way to position this concept, because we keep on talking about data, first, third, fourth, second party data, but actually this is really a replication of that personalized experience that I think his great-grandfather was talking about. Second experience I had locally, whilst driving into our local town, I saw my favorite mountain biking brand on the side of a huge warehouse and thought, goodness me, I must rush in there and see what's going on. Company was called YT Industries. They have always been a direct to consumer online retailer, and they sell a pretty high price ticket item to stupid people like myself who like to spend money on mountain bikes. And we're talking of a sort of entry point of £3,000 to £4,000, all the way up to £10,000 to £12,000 for a mountain bike. Now, building a relationship with someone in a D2C environment whilst still trying to get them to buy these high ticket items, I'm sure has been a challenge for them. So when I walked in, what I realized was it wasn't a shop, it was a showroom. And there was this wonderful experience I had where I was left alone. I didn't have a young assistant rush across the room to immediately try and gain data from me, but I just had this very casual experience where I could touch and feel the product. The product was put into various different settings so I could see it. I could actually ride it, and I could play with it and get on it and really experience what that product was like. And then as I sort of came to the end of my experience, somebody, luckily, I think they probably analysed that it wasn't just 18-year-olds buying mountain bikes. There was gentlemen of a slightly more portly age also purchasing the same items. Somebody of my own age came over to me, and instead of trying to aggregate data from me in such a pervasive way, they had a conversation with me about mountain biking. And as they were doing that, they introduced the form of consent. Do you mind if I make some notes? Because it will really help kind of judge how we treat you after this. I left the location having had a great conversation about one of my favorite sports. And the minute I hit the car, I started to receive communications and data in line with my communication with the individual. And it was such a non-invasive relationship. And it was such an interesting post experience, because I was only getting shared data relevant to the area of mountain biking that I was interested in, or the product I was looking at.
Really, so is a key thing here then must be a combination of relevance and expertise. So, Yeah, for people who come from an e-commerce selling and merchandising background, we've seen with everything from search to content writing to navigation approaches to attributes that the kind of information you put up and display for example, an electric toothbrush is different to the information you need for, a pair of jeans or a top. So we're used to this idea that products have, if you like, their own data requirements. We're used to the idea that the selling narrative has its own requirements, things to focus on, passion, interest, etc. And we're now getting a more sophisticated idea of the consumer interaction to focus on the things that are relevant, where, if you like, my expertise and products meet your expertise and passion and personality. So this really is, if you like, drawing together the product, the customer, the expertise, just to get that important inflection around a relevant discussion with them.
Ian, eloquent as always. I think the truth of the matter is people feel like data gathering is not a sales exercise. And as you said, that understanding that data gathering doesn't need to be invasive, it doesn't need to be irrelevant, and I don't need to know everything about you and identify you in a multitude of directions just to be able to send you an irrelevant email. And it's important that organizations understand that data gathering process, it can be light, it can be conversational, it can be knowledge-based, it can be a way to just get enough to be able to specifically target the right message. Because actually, where does the journey of purchasing start? We all talk about moments of truth. Where does that moment of truth start now? Does it start when you're standing in front of the product with all of the data you need to make a decision to buy it? Or I think in the modern experience/fulfillment environment, that moment of truth, I think, has become elongated, and it starts significantly before you even look at products. You might actually enter into the brand before you get to the product. And that's, I think, that's what I think that this world of combination between those two environments really starts to come to the forefront.
Okay, so let's have a look at how we can use this.
So, let's be perfectly frank and honest. This has been a challenge that organizations have dealt with for quite some time. How on earth, as you said before, do we pull together this bi-directional relationship with all of our data sources and all of our activation platforms? So how do I, let's use the YT or the Coutons experience that we talked about earlier, how do I make sure that I'm getting the relevant picture of Lindsay McEwan as he interacts with my brand? How am I pulling that from all of the touch points that I may come into the brand? But more importantly, what am I doing with it then? And this is really where zero-party data becomes relevant and exciting. We're all used to really poor use of data collection, and it's put a real cloud over some parts of the industry, because you know what? I'm just not going to give you my data of any type, because all you do after our interaction is send me the same old stuff. I get the same old irrelevant emails. And I think that organizations really need to think about this as a technology challenge that takes time to solve. How do I get all of that data from all of the different sources? How do I make sense of it? How do I underpin it with a consensual environment that means that I'm comfortable sharing data? And then how do organizations use that data that they're collecting to fuel the engagement platform that they have with those consumers? It's the concept of getting something valuable in riposte for providing data. And I think that's the real nub of where these customer data platforms that we're seeing a multitude of hit the industry. And there is confusion as to where customer data platforms fall. Is this just the latest 3-letter acronym that my sales team are going to be hammering me with? But actually, this is an evolution of a multitude of platforms that we've put into engagement side of a business. Really, this is about building an environment for data capture, normalization, consent underpinning all of that data and capture, and then making sense of who these people are so that we can fuel that engagement platform. That's the key.
So, no, I was saying, so I'm loving that, but I'm looking at this diagram and there's a little practical note that is tinging away in my head, which is, let's say, let's say I could never get a job again, in which case I might be an e-commerce director somewhere. And I'm looking at each of these points: mobile, email, contact center, social. Each of the expert, wonderful vendors for all of these solution areas and channels will have told me we have an amazing data layer. So basically, if someone rings in and sniffs, my AI will say they're unhappy. I'll record it against their phone number. I'll link it to this. We have loads of data, and someone else will tell me the same. In social, we're doing sentiment analysis. Mobile, we're getting location, whether they accelerate up the stairs or not. So I've already paid for lots and lots of data. I'm struggling with it, let's be fair. I mean, it's a massive exercise now. And then all of a sudden, this bring, Lindsay's on the phone. Let me tell you about a CDP. Where does CDP fit in to a mature, very capable retailer that already has data repositories littered all over their domain?
Great question. And of course, let's just expand the challenge. What if you're quite a large retailer and each one of these data collection environments are physically in different locations? You've got a mobile team, you've got a social team, we've got an online team, we've got and these teams are actually not just data silos, but physical silos. And therein lies the challenge. We've seen the rise of the chief data officer, and he or she has a real challenge, because actually this is about data democratization. This is about learning that we have to build an environment where everybody shares the relevant data on a platform that can build translations between all of these individuals. Because you're absolutely right, Ian. All of these products that we see in this wheel, you have a provider for. You're very happy, your structures are there, they're collecting all the right data, etc., etc. But then how do we pull all of that together? How do we make sense of the profile as opposed to the platform or the channel? How do we put the customer at the center of this data aggregation exercise? And we at Tealium have always kind of believed we're a little bit hippie-esque, because we don't believe that the red, the blues, the greens, or the oranges can solve this just by getting everything in this. Every single platform becomes red, or every single platform becomes green, and then you'll be able to do it. Well, the reality of it is that's not the way the world works. There isn't one provider who does everything inside your organization, and we probably wouldn't want to do business with them because it would take away that agility. How do you have a profile at the center of your business where you're putting your consumer, your customer, that prospect or customer right at the center, not the channel in which you talk to them, or not the data gathering exercise? So we are the Switzerland of data platforms. We help democratization of data between all of these channels. We help people centralize it. We help people centralize consent across all these channels. And then we help them use this centralized consumer profile to fuel how those platforms talk back to that consumer.
Fantastic. Well, look, you said Switzerland. I immediately start thinking of Toblerone. So move us on so I don't get distracted. And let's also think about just a couple of things that you would be saying. So practically, we get it. It's a layer of rules, abstractions, knowledge that is not bound by the delivery or collection channels. So I'm loving that. What next?
Well, again, it's not easy. This is the first thing I always say to people. It's not easy. It takes time. It is sometimes seen as an interesting curve because there's a lot of work to do before value starts hitting the brand. So some simple things to do is to figure out whether or not you are collecting data in a consensual way across all of those platforms. Do you have, I mean, the amount of organizations we speak to who don't have a single global data layer, which is platform independent. Because if I'm collecting someone's handle in a different country, am I using a different attribute to track that individual? How do I have a consistent view of how I'm collecting data across my platforms? Secondly, how do you think about putting that profile, that consumer profile, who's consented, that they're happy to talk to you? How do you think about putting that at the beginning of your business? And how do you think about using that effectively? Last, there's been a real explosion in AI and ML, and it's almost turned into a two-letter acronym that the board suggests I need some of that MLE stuff by the next board meeting.
ML being, just let's open that out in case no one's heard the acronym before.
Yeah, machine learning or artificial intelligence. I need to get me some of that. Actually, what you really need to do is look at applying these algorithms to that consented global data layer, to that individual profile. And then more importantly, once I've made a really cool decision about whether or not this person's propensity to buy a product, how do I actually activate that decision through these fueled channels that we talked about? So it's about looking at data less from a platform dependent manner, but it's really about being a little bit more heuristic about sitting back and thinking about the consumer at the center and how their data works through all these channels and how you use their interaction across multiple channels to pull them deeper and deeper into the brand, product, or experience.
Right. Well, look, we had a conversation a bit like this many months ago. I think you were the last meeting I had in the UK before lockdown. So that shows. And then all of a sudden we're here again. Anyway, we were chatting about this, and luckily we were doing a chat, but Emma picked it up and did some research on it. So Lindsay, if you can advance the slide so everyone can see the lovely, thank you, cover of the white paper that Emma researched and authored. So looking very much at this idea of how permission can fuel what we've called the relationship economy, so data, consent, and value, a new retail bargain. So Emma, welcome back. You've been listening. We've heard from Lindsay. Tell us a bit about the white paper, what the approach was, and the key findings.
Yeah, of course, Ian. The white paper, we surveyed and interviewed retailers, internet retailing readers, other industry analysts to sort of gather information on the topic and how retail has moved from that spray and pray marketing approach to a more targeted approach, and where zero-party data is actually being used and the issues that people have with trying to use it, because there's challenges as far as people, processes and technology within the organisation, as Lindsay has already mentioned. And also looking at the actual consent, how much of it is verifiable. We've had GDPR, but what's happened post that as well, and getting the consent on an ongoing basis to continue the conversation in real time with consumers. Amongst the retailers that were surveyed, more than half believe that a consent-based approach aligns with brand values and would provide commercial benefit. So there really is something worthwhile in all this. But another statistic that's came out of it is only 14% of consumers believe that more than half of the emails they receive are relevant or of use to them. And actually, a lot of marketers agree with that. because
So hang
only
on,
50.
we're saying that, let me just replay that. 14% of people thought that more than half of their incoming comms were worth it.
Yeah.
So the implication then, he says, just reciprocally, is that 86% of people think that more than half their inbox is just rubbish.
Yeah. How many,
Now,
if you look at promotional emails that come into your inbox, how many of them do you acknowledge past the subject line and actually click through and open?
Well, you know that, given that we correspond a lot. So, but I think what's interesting here, though, is if you're talking to, let's say, an email marketing professional, they'd go 14%. I'll take that. So one of the problems we have with a lot of our outbound marketing is that it can be cost effective in the short term with 1-2% of people paying attention. So it's if we overvalue the 2% who still respond and don't see the damage of annoying the 98% who don't. So there's an economic disparity here, but we reward the short term. We can afford to get away with poor behavior, even though the consumer is telling us they don't like it. So how seriously are retailers taking this? Is this a discussion? It's a bit like global warming, where we're saying, oh, terrible things are going to happen. What is the action that they're looking at now?
Well, a lot of them are saying that, or the majority of them are saying that consent-based approach aligns with their brand values and how the company behaves, and that they want to enter into that customer bargain. Having informed consent at each stage of the interaction is either extremely or very important to them. So it's not that they're not wanting to improve, and they're saying that 65% are able to base their communication with customers upon current verifiable consent, which has been obtained post GDPR. And that they also think that by doing this, it's going to give their business positive differentiation from competitors.
But when we talk about consent,
it's harder than
yes. So before we look at some of the reasons that they aren't implementing this nirvana, we're talking about consent, and then you say post GDPR. So it sounds to me as if that has been a tick box saying, yeah, fine, contact me. But this isn't this granular, contextual, real-time consent that Lindsay's been talking to us about. Did you get a feeling that we're getting a mismatch in terms of consent? There's a file and forget it of GDPR compliance, I can now spam you, versus this interactional approach of every time we have contact, just revalidating that. Did you get a feel for that from the surveys and conversations you had? How far are retailers, if you like, up the consent savviness scale, or how aware are they of real-time consent?
They're aware of it, and part of it is trying to make their communication more authentic, so that if the customer or if the consumer has given consent to receive marketing or to enter into a conversation ongoing, they then shouldn't be surprised by any of the messages that they receive from the retailer, because there's value to the customer and there's value to the retailer in carrying on the conversation. And it's way more than like just giving an email address in exchange for a 5% discount. For example, two retailers that we spoke to, one is the Entertainer and the Early Learning Centre, and they're setting up a birthday club whereby they give the names and ages of their children in exchange for having access to wish lists. They can see what their child wants, they get discounts at the time, and they can set that up for their whole family. So in that way, there is the value exchange in both ways.
But also it's relevant. If someone just out of the blue said, dob in your kids' data, you go, whoa, 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 that's inappropriate. Whereas if you understand, yes, it's because it'll be child appropriate, they'll send vouchers for their birthdays, or it'll help me with Christmas present buying, then all of a sudden I understand that relevant data. And there's, if you like, a sort of unspoken deal between us that I give you something in return for a value now or later. So I think that's quite important. But you also looked at, and we can see the slide here, that despite the recognition that this should be filed under a good thing, they weren't able to just motor ahead and leap straight to this nirvana. Now, I get the technology thing. Everyone says, oh, new technology. I get that budget is always an issue. Oh, I haven't got any money. But I was really fascinated by this. A third of people saying that internal was the main reason they couldn't do it. Tell me more about that. What do they mean by that?
Well, there's a couple of things. As Lindsay said earlier, there's the data being siloed physically across the organisation, so it's not held by one department or one person's responsibility. And so this sort of brings it into an organisational issue as well as the technology and the budgetary one, and how important, or the importance that retailers place on that data and being able to use it. So how senior is the person in the organisation that has responsibility for data? Do they have a chief data officer? How senior are they? Are they on the board? Or is it somebody that's just part, I don't mean just, but is it somebody who's part of IT or analytics department? Or is it responsibility within e-commerce or marketing?
So I think that probably also explains, we've had questions in about, how do people get it up the agenda? And you can see here that 16% was saying, we get it, it's just we haven't prioritized it. So it does sound as if having a switched on senior stakeholder makes all the difference. And perhaps, I think, Lindsay, if we go back to your data schematic a few slides ago, then in a way, it's the place where all of these sources of data and all of these sources of revenue come together, is probably also where you'll see that ROI case that says, I can harmonize and improve this rather than tactical solutions at a lower level. You did some, yeah.
You mustn't underestimate that excellent comment that both you and Emma made about who's driving this internally within the organization. I empathize greatly for the role of the chief data officer inside organizations, because I think in the modern experience environment, they might end up as the next CEO, because I think the key to solving this is that interdepartmental collaboration and opening up the silos without physically opening up the silos, just by sharing what we need to. That's a difficult task. And having an individual who is well respected and high enough up the organization that they can build both processes, technology, but also get the people to comply is key to making this work.
Yeah. Well, listen, we're slightly running out of time, and it's an invidious task to slow things down to an end. But we've mentioned lockdown a few times. Let's just round off maybe with a COVID question / insight. As we talk to retailers, and ironically, we've been having more conversations because people can just put a 20-minute Zoom call in a slot in their day. So the conversations are very active. Everyone we've spoken to about how COVID has affected their business, they've all said that communication is running at 10 to 20 times the normal level. So they're making much more effort to communicate. They're working much more closely with people who previously might have been lost in reporting structures, and they're reaching out across silos because the way they have to do business during lockdown has changed. So do you see any correlation, if that's possible, between the stresses of post-COVID working and maybe a new acceptance or interest in harmonizing around this consumer relevant conversation? Is that something that you've seen, or am I just jumping the gun here, Lindsay?
Well, you know, people keep on telling me that things are never going to go back to normal. I'm not sure that this economy that we live in can cope with things not going back to normal. But I do think the way that people will think about the concept of the experience will change. I see a lot of organizations thinking about disintermediating between supply of goods and experience, touch and feel. We've started to see the first IKEAs opening without a huge storeroom at the back of the showroom. They're just a showroom. And the fulfillment of that is done after the experience. So I do think that the high street will have to react to a desire to have more of a joined up experience. And you know, Emma put it beautifully. It's not just question answer. It's question answer, question answer, question answer. It's iterative. It is a process that you refine as you move through an experience. So I do think that there is some correlation between organizations like myself, my own, realizing that actually we're getting some pretty good productivity out of our teams, and we're saving a huge amount of money by not having them flying around the world. And I wonder if organizations are going to feel the same way. Do I really need to invest in that high street infrastructure, or can I blend online and offline in a way that makes my profits more exciting?
And also, that blending is different. And I was talking to someone running a online grocery, and they were saying that they are now capturing data around the family unit. So before, I used to just be an address where they drop off bags, whereas now they want to know, kids, do I live with an elderly relative? Am I shielding? Should I have priority in digital queues? Again, I understand giving that data, but it's a deepening of that relationship. So Emma, you had, Lindsay, if you can just advance us, an interesting chat with Orange, and the full case study is there. But just rounding off, are you seeing that we're going to be having a cross-silo, customer-focused post-COVID world?
Well, a lot of the retailers that I was talking to during lockdown, when they sort of managed to get their heads up from the day-to-day trading, whatever, is the surprising amount of agility in the industry of retailers of all sizes. We've always spoken about the large retailers wanting to be flexible, wanting to be able to move as fast as their sort of niche competitors or whatever. But we've had people, going back to the mountain bike analogy of Lindsay's earlier, people building mountain bikes in their offices because they haven't got enough room in the warehouses, and other people are still working from home. New companies have been launched online where they were in the B2B space, and the B2C retailers have been speaking more across departments and working faster and transforming the industry because they've had to, because of the way that the world has changed in the last few months. So I think there's been a lot of lessons learned and a lot of new ideas that we probably wouldn't have seen in the industry for another 5 years.
Well, it's interesting because the CEO of AO.com, we were interviewing him the other day, and he had a great statement, which is that we've done 5 years of development in 5 weeks. So look, our time is coming to an end. I think we've covered some really fascinating things, which is at a pivotal moment, which is where we move from, if you like, industrialized push processes. So we're listening to the customer, we're responding in a granular way, at the same time as we're reshaping our internal structures and approaches in order to come out of lockdown. So fascinating time. Thank you both very much for your time. Emma, for doing all this work. Lindsay, for contributing to the research and taking us through your thinking on this, which is absolutely fascinating. I will just make sure, by the way, that everyone who's logged on to this will get a link to download Emma's white paper. So if you haven't already and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I can't pass another day without reading it, fear not, the link will be in your inboxes because we're responding to that demand. All it is now that remains for me to say a final thank you, Emma, Lindsay, great chatting with you, and of course, to everyone who's logged on today, thank you for your time and happy trading.